Why don't we rent a video tonight?
Yeah, can we please?
On a weeknight?
Yeah, come on, Mom. It's okay.
Sure. Come on. Let's throw caution to the wind.
Put a little weekend in your week. Rent a video.
Welcome to Vericon Video, a sometimes weekly show where we relive forgotten and unforgettable movies that once lined the shelves of video stores everywhere. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Joseph.
And we're back to take on 2019 after a little holiday break. We've got a great year planned for you, a solid mix of beloved cult films, mainstream classics, and some of our personal favorites, as well as yours. That's why you come to Vericon Video. We want you to have the movies that you love, but also give you a chance to discover a title you didn't know about, or a movie that you always wanted to see but didn't. Today we're talking about Clue from 1985, rated PG, 1 hour 36 minutes, starring Tim Curry, Martin Mull, Madeline Kahn, Eileen Brennan, Christopher Lloyd, Michael McKean, Leslie Ann Warren, and Colleen Kemp. Now, Joe Bob Briggs, who has nothing to do with this movie, by the way, is back on Shudder after a long hiatus with the last drive-in movie marathons. And I remember him way back from his days on TNT with Monster Vision, and I always enjoyed his banter with the mail girl and his tangents and digressions, but most of all his drive-in totals. So to pay a little tribute to him, we're going to do something a little special for today's episode. We have the drive-in totals for you. They are 7 dead bodies, 0 naked breasts, 1 random creepy clown jack in the box, lead pipe to the head, wrench to the head, candlestick to the head, knife to the back, singing telegram shooting, gratuitous corpse fondling, attempted aardvarking innuendo, exploding chandeliers, monkey brain eating, bullet counting, candlestick foo, Doberman pinscher foo, 3-star. Brandon and Joseph say, check it out. All right, let's get ready to shake, rattle, and roll, and shaboom, shaboom in today's episode. So sit back, relax, and welcome back.
Welcome to the Cafe 80s, where it's always morning in America, even in the afternoon.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I have the only gun on board. Welcome to Con Air.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
Okay, good evening, America, and welcome aboard Apollo 13.
I'm so glad you could come. This is going to be such an exciting day. I hope you're enjoying it. I think you will.
6 strangers are invited to a New England mansion by a blackmailing host and must work together to solve an unfolding murder mystery with the host's butler, and the killer may be among them. So, Joseph, what board games did you play as a kid?
There were quite a few. I gotta mention Monopoly, of course. Monopoly was a big fan favorite amongst my family. Clue, as a matter of fact, was one of my personal favorites. I played that a lot as a kid. Especially during middle school, I had the honor of being the reigning champion amongst my family in that board game. I just happened to focus so much on the intention of getting the right weapon right that it just culminated into the fact of me just getting the crown winner every single time. So it was nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Then chess might have been the last one though. Chess was.
Oh yeah. I played chess quite a bit. Monopoly, not as much. I mean, I liked it for a while, but I don't know if I ever played a complete game of Monopoly. Just after a few hours, it just starts to wear you down.
Right. Well, it gets pretty intense too, because it's like you got all this money and you got all this property, and then you got your little sister looking right across from you with this dead eye. And
it gets very competitive.
Oh, it's bad.
Now, there haven't been a whole lot of movies based on board games. There were some that were like board game movies, like Zathura and Jumanji and stuff like that. But for movies actually based on board games, there's been Battleship and what else?
What?
Can you think of anything?
No, I mean, that's the one that comes to mind. I can't think of any. Because I always thought Jumanji was the other way around, but I guess you're right.
Like Jumanji, like it was. I remember reading that as a kid, getting it from the local library by I think Chris Van Allsburg or something. I think he also wrote Zathura or something like that. But yeah, then the movie came out, and it was, of course, nothing really like the book. And Battleship. I mean, that's a stretch. I mean, in name, It's Battleship and it has battleships in it.
Yeah,
but
we're talking about Hollywood here, you know.
I never saw it, but I really hope that they snuck in the line, "You sink my battleship." Just so I can hate
for
them.
shits and giggles.
Just so I could hate it even more than I already do without having seen it. But now I've heard for some years now that Monopoly may be coming as a movie.
I wonder how that's going to turn out.
Yeah, well, several years ago, there was talk about it being a Ridley Scott big budget thing. And then now as early as, I think, 2015, Lionsgate and Hasbro were talking about working on a Monopoly movie. And it was going to be more of a Goonies type thing, I guess. And they had even at one point attached Andrew Niccol, who wrote the screenplay for The Truman Show, to write the screenplay. So we'll see.
Goodness.
We'll see what comes of that.
I can only imagine seeing a wheelbarrow starting on this little Go platform, you know, and having this entire odyssey of experiences as it goes through like these avenues and getting past jail.
The little Scottish Yorkie.
Yeah.
What else was there? Was there it was a shoe?
Yeah, there's a shoe
and
a thumbnail.
I don't know. It's ridiculous. They can't. I don't know what they're going to do with that. So we'll give you a little bit of context and background on Clue. It was released theatrically on December 13th, 1985. Just a few months after I popped out into the world. And it was directed by Jonathan Lynn, who wrote the screenplay in collaboration with John Landis. The film was produced by Deborah Hill, a longtime writing and producing partner of John Carpenter. It's based on the popular board game, as we said. It's been around since 1949, so almost 70 years. There was a novelization written by novelist and screenwriter Michael McDowell, who co-wrote Beetlejuice and co-adapted Stephen King's Thinner. And there was also a children's adaptation entitled Paramount Pictures Presents Clue, the Storybook, written by Landis, Lynn, and Ann Matthews. So I can't imagine that would have been a popular kids' book at the time, but it exists for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
But this time around, we're going to save some of the really meaty facts about the movie for little check-ins and a little whodunit tally to keep up with the murders, where they happened, and with what. And we'll be counting those bullets in the revolver too, which becomes a subject of hot debate later on in the film.
No pun intended, by the way.
So, Joseph, are you ready to walk through this movie and talk about it?
I am ready to G.O., Brandon.
All right, let's do it. Let's duck out into the storm and drive up to Hill House. Now it's all unscripted. So
Yeah.
So shit. So over the opening credits, we meet Wadsworth, played by Tim Curry, in one of my favorite roles of his. He arrives at this huge mansion on the hill in the middle of the night, and there are two big barking guard dogs outside the front door on chains, and they're lunging at him. And of course, he's brought some meaty treats for him. So he throws them these bones and stuff. And so they're pacified. And as he's about to go into the house, you can see him like he's sniffing around. He looks down and pulls his shoe up, and then just looks at gives this dog a really dirty look, and the dog just looks really embarrassed.
like thanks for the meat, but sorry.
Yeah, sorry about that shit on your shoe, Wadsworth. But I mean, it's a great moment because he doesn't say anything. So
right.
And throughout this movie, there's a lot of physical comedy that really pays off. And with this dog shit on the shoe joke, they get a lot of mileage out of it.
Yes.
And so we get a title card, New England, 1954. We meet Yvette, the French maid. Shake, Rattle, and Roll's playing in the background, and he asks her, if she's ready, you have instructions. And then you see her like she's kind of sniffing around because she smells the shit. And I think she checks her shoes too. And we meet the cook in the kitchen. She's preparing dinner. And then the first guests arrive. So Colonel Mustard is the first to appear, played by Martin Mull. And we learn that everyone coming to the dinner party has been assigned an alias, and they've all received a letter inviting them and saying that, hey, we know you're being blackmailed. Come to this dinner party, and we're going to, I don't know, have dinner and and
Talk about the blackmail.
yeah, just have a convo about the blackmail, which everybody seems pretty chill when they arrive.
Yeah,
They don't really seem too anxious at all. Surprisingly,
this is a nice house. I don't know anybody here, even though I do, but I'm not going to tell anybody about it. So you know what? It's all good and fun.
yeah, that's another thing that really kind of strikes me about the interaction between the characters is, of course, over time we know that many of them know each other or know of each other, but they just play it off like they're strangers.
Right.
Even in their interactions and stuff. But even though they kind of jab at each other, like kind of hinting that, hey, I know this about you. And so I don't know, I thought that was kind of interesting. And so Wadsworth introduces himself as the butler, and Colonel and Yvette are kind of put together in this room while Wadsworth attends to the next guest that has arrived. And there's another little great physical comedy gag where the Colonel is having a drink and he's about to talk to Yvette, and then Wadsworth opens the door and the Colonel is behind the door, so he just gets pushed down
to the side.
Yeah, to the side. And it's the way they play it off is great because the camera pans like with Wadsworth, so you just hear Colonel Mustard just falling down and getting squashed by the door. It's just little things like that give you a chuckle.
Agreed.
And notice, like, as you see, like, the cars arrive, like, they're the same color as that character's playing piece from the game.
Right.
Yeah, so
it's a little detail.
Yeah, just those little nods I think is really clever. And Mrs. White arrives, and she smells something too, so she looks down.
What a surprise.
Again, a lot of mileage out of that dog shit joke.
So something else. I think it's funny to note that for 90% of the movies that we have done so far, there has been some form of shit, of horse shit, of dog shit.
Yes, I thought that too, and I was trying to remember all the movies that had dog shit in it. So we had Drop Dead Fred and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And I feel like there might have been another at some point, but I don't remember.
Maybe.
I don't remember.
Maybe Fred the Bird in the Headless Horseman, Sleepy Hollow. Maybe it. I
feel like there probably was some
bird shit.
Bird shit. Yeah, lots of different animal feces in that movie. Let's see. So Wadsworth observes that Mrs. White and Yvette know each other. And meanwhile, we see Miss Scarlet, who's broken down on the side of the road in the storm, and she sees another car driving by, and so she quickly bends over the hood and sticks her ass out, using her hiney as bait. And
I thought that was a brilliant job
because you can see the driver, he stops and then backs the car up, and it's the Professor Plum, this Christopher Lloyd, and he's like, "Oh, you need a lift," and so she gets in, and they note that they're going to the same place. They receive the same invitation. And we're back in the mansion, and Mrs. Peacock arrives, the wonderful Eileen Brennan. And then soon after follows Mr. Green, played by Michael McKean. And he's really funny. I thought they're all really funny in this movie. But right off the bat, as he's walking into the place, Wadsworth is yelling at the dogs. He's like, "Sit!" Mr. Green just sits down right away. And "Not you, sir." So we have those.
Awesome.
It's really kind of, I don't know, just really theatrical kinds of gags and that physical comedy.
I think it definitely sets the tone of the movie, because we expect it to be some type of low key horror flick, and then all of a sudden, you have these cars rolling up, and it shows the mansion, and then a convenient lightning bolt just comes down to the mansion, like it's just some cartoon flick that you'd see, in a fantasy world.
Yeah, it's very over the top. Like they're really overselling the scary haunted house on the hill. I mean, they call it Hill House, for goodness sake. So your mind immediately goes to like House on Haunted Hill or something. And so and you've got the storm and the really the Child's Play lightning. Like you remember in the skylight in the toy store, you get that kind of stuff. Right. And the
big heavy rainfall.
Yeah, yes,
the wind.
And it's always late at night, which I think it's only supposed to be 7:00, 7:30 or something, because the cook says dinner would be ready at 7 or something.
They must be on our daylight savings time hour. Must be in December, January.
Yeah, well, that's a good point because it gets pitch black at what? Not even 5
p.m.
Yeah, 5 o'clock. Yeah, so we've got another 20 minutes before we're in complete darkness. Miss Scarlet and Professor Plum arrive, and Professor Plum seems to recognize Yvette, or maybe he's just oogling her because he's kind of a pervy character, as we later find out. Like he's just kind of, giving her the eyes and kind of
a little handsy.
Yeah, he's a very, very handsy guy. And just to note, this is 1985, and so he had just done Back to the Future, so this is the same. This is around the same time. So just juxtaposing or contrasting those characters, of Doc Brown versus Professor Plum, it's just very striking, and it really shows you like what he's able to do with these really extreme, eccentric types of characters.
Right. Oh man.
So Wadsworth offers champagne. The dinner gong goes off, and they all go into the dining room. And there's this really short, great line where Colonel Mustard asks Wadsworth, "And what do you do, sir?" Or he says, Colonel Mustard asks Wadsworth what he does, and he says, "Well, I'm the butler." He's like, "And what do you do, sir?" "I buttle, sir." I
what
buttle.
an answer.
Yeah, I buttle, sir. Meaning what? He says that he takes care of the dining room and the kitchen, make sure everything's tidy.
Nice and tidy.
Yeah, tidy. And so they learn that there's an empty seat at the head of the table, and this is reserved for Mr. Body, who is coming. But Wadsworth says that this is not the host. And I'm like, well, who is the host? And he's he's just Tim Currying all over the place.
Right. Doesn't give a straight answer.
No.
Leaves everybody hanging.
And there's also, like I said, like throughout, like even though this is a very dialogue heavy movie, like the silent comedy is really, really good. So there's this moment between Professor Plum and Mrs. White, and they're drinking their soup, and
that's all you hear.
Yeah, and they're just looking at each other. It's almost like they're dueling soup slurpers.
Slurps. The slurpathon.
Because Plum goes first, and then Mrs. White looks down, and she just goes at it too. And everybody's just staring.
Gentlemen, get ready for the Slurp Challenge 101 featuring Professor Plum and Miss White.
And in this corner. And then he forgets what character he's playing. He's like, "Good evening. I'm Dr. Emmett Brown. I'm standing on the parking lot at Twin Pines Mall. It's Saturday morning, October 26, 1985, 1:18 a.m. And this is temporal experiment number 1. Marty,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm Professor Plum. He just, and then I don't know.
And I'm a handsy son of a bitch.
He is never not groping a woman in this movie. So Wadsworth leaves them to it, and Mrs. Peacock decides she's going to break the ice. She's very chatty, and she's determined to have a good time despite not knowing what's going on. And isn't this soup delicious?
That was a good line.
She's great. You could tell she's used to being a socialite and being very, in these very like formal types of dining situations.
Right.
And she reveals that she is used to being a host because her husband is and then cut off. No details about yourself. And Mr. Green's like, "Oh, I know who you are. I work in Washington too."
Wow. Yeah.
And there's a lot of those little zingers. Like there's always thunder or the doorbell rings whenever there's this dun 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 kind of moment.
I love it.
And Mr. Green, and he's falling all over the place. He says he's accident prone. He's he's a scaredy cat, and so
very clumsy,
super clumsy. He's spilling brandy or
champagne
champagne everywhere, and he's falling down. There's a point where he's like resting against I don't know, a small table or something, and it just collapses for no reason. He's like, "Oh, sorry, I'm accident prone." So Mrs. Peacock at this point, this will come in later as she's eating the main course or the entree, whatever, that I was like, "Oh, this is my favorite recipe." And Wadsworth's like, "No, I know."
Right.
And then
how does he know? Like, oh my gosh, this is crazy.
Yeah, they just leave it at that. And it's like, okay, well, moving on.
Yeah.
And so
glad that happened.
Yeah. And so they finally get a little conversation going, like trying to figure out like what details about themselves that they're able to get away with without really revealing their true identity. And so Professor Plum reveals that he works for the UN. He's formerly a shrink, and that Colonel Mustard is a real colonel, and that in my notes I have Mrs. I don't know who it is. Let's see, Mrs. Who? Not Miss Scarlet. Wait, Miss Scarlet. Yes, Miss Scarlet.
Miss Scarlet saw him before. Yeah.
Yeah, Miss Scarlet saw him before, but he's a little confused. He said, "But I don't know if I've seen you." And she said, "Well, you may not have seen me, but I've seen you."
Right.
And so again, there's this little where people know of each other, but they don't know how.
It's like you're internally cringing inside, and you just want to just be like, "Can you guys just fess up and tell each other how you guys know each other?"
Right, because at this point they don't know what the stakes are, so so there's really no reason to play hardcore by these rules that this butler that you've never met has given to you.
So it's all just generalized small talk,
It's surprising that they play along as much as they do. I mean, even early on, before they even know kind of what kind of trouble they could potentially be in.
Right, exactly.
So the mysterious Mr. Body arrives, who has very bad vibes.
Very bad vibes.
And I want to mention that this actor's name is Lee Ving. Lee, Lee, Ving, V-I-N-G. Lee Ving. Hi, I'm Lee Ving. All right, bye. I don't know. It's not his real name. He is an Italian name, but I just thought that was kind of funny. Like why? Like if you could pick a stage name, why would you?
Why? Just.
I mean, it's memorable,
I guess.
Like we're not gonna cast this guy named Lee Ving.
I guess if you're 6 drinks in, it might be memorable.
Yeah. Which I don't think he was in a whole lot. I noticed a few things on IMDb, but I've forgotten all of them by now.
But definitely a bad vibe character for sure. He walks into that dining room. I was like, all right.
He's got his hair slicked back. He looks kind of greasy. He's got that sport jacket and the alligator skin bag and the spats on his shoes.
His face is just looks evil. It just looks like you don't want to be in the same room with him. Yeah. I feel sorry for a date he'd have to go on. I mean, damn, like the girl might just be sitting there pissing her pants just looking at him because he looks that evil. I wouldn't. I don't know.
I think it's that smirk because
it's definitely the smirk.
He's got that look like I know something you don't know, and I'm going to use it against you. He just has that. It's not that steely, shark-eyed look that like Patrick Bateman had. It's this kind of like I'm not going to hide like what I am and my villainous nature. Just wears it. There's no facade there. So
just additional does.
It's all over the place. They're dun-dun-dung all over the place. So Wadsworth pretty much says that Mr. Body is going to bring an end to some painful, confidential matter that concerns all of them. This is what they all have in common. So they go to the study and all have a seat, maybe some brandy, and Wadsworth, he says he's going to explain everything, and then Mr. Body tries to leave, which is kind of weird. Like he comes in all suave and like in this take charge kind of way. And then he just says like, it's all a hoax and we should get out of here. And he takes off running.
Right.
Did you find that confusing?
I did. Yes. Very confusing. Cause I was like, well, aren't you the guy who's sitting at the head of the table? Like you planned this and then 5 minutes into it, you're already wanting to leave.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It doesn't make any sense with some of the possible endings. Like there is one where it's possible that he wasn't completely on board with all this and that was kind of a break in his character, and we'll get to those endings. We'll come back to it, but for just that moment he has this panic and then he tries to leave and break out through the conservatory, and of course there's a giant Doberman Pinscher on the other side, and so he returns to the study. So Wadsworth says, you're all being blackmailed, but you don't know who's doing it. And thank you, Yvette. She goes away. And Wadsworth says that Professor Plum used to be a shrink who worked with lunatics suffering from delusions of grandeur. Yes, but now I work for the UN. So your work has not changed. This is a joke that I only got when I watched for the podcast because it happened so fast. There's
the little things.
Yeah, and playing off the joke, like they play it straight faced, and immediately after the joke is there, they're immediately moving on to something else. So you almost don't have time to really process that it's a joke about working for the UN is like working with lunatics with delusions of grandeur. And so Professor Plum, it turns out, had his license to practice psychiatry revoked for inappropriate behavior with a female patient. And Mrs. Peacock had been taking bribes from lobbyists. She's the wife of a politician in Washington. Miss Scarlet was a madam during the war. And Professor Plum's like, really? What's the phone number?
Like he's already going into it.
That little horn dog, like he can't turn it off for 2 minutes. Like
it's ridiculous. I mean, he walks up to the door of the mansion, right, and already has his hand on Miss Scarlet's ass. yeah. Like,
every moment he's got his hand somewhere on Miss Scarlet's body. Like I mean, of all the women like in the film, she in particular like has his attention, and he takes every moment to get a good feel, And, there's a really great exchange here. I don't have the whole exchange like in my notes, but it's the bit about the double negative. Do you remember that?
Yes. Right here. Hold on. I got this. Oh, okay. I have it.
Oh, okay.
All right. So, Mr. Green. So how did you know Colonel Musser works in Washington? Is he one of your clients? Colonel Musser says, certainly not. And then Mr. Green, I was asking Miss Scarlet. And Colonel Musser says, well, you tell them it's not true, Miss Scarlet. It's not true, Professor Plum. Is that true, Miss Scarlet? No, that's not true, Mr. Green. So it is true. Wadsworth, a double negative. Colonel Musser, double negative. You mean you have photographs? Yeah. So
that's great. Thank you for that.
Oh, I try.
And so Mrs. White says that she's being blackmailed because it is believed that she killed her husband. And this is another little thing where she says, oh, he was, he never liked me that much, and he was crazy, a madman, and he threatened to kill me in public. And Miss Scarlet says, why would he want to kill you in public? And Wadsworth says, I think she meant he threatened in public to kill her. He rolls his eyes.
Be clear.
Just the semantics there. Why would he want to kill you in public? So we learned that her husband was a nuclear physicist, and I think Miss Scarlet or somebody asks her, does she miss him? And she says, it's a matter of life after death. Now he's dead, and I have a life.
So subtle.
I know. Madeline Kahn here, she's really great. She's really deadpan in her delivery.
Yes.
But she said, we learned that her first husband also disappeared. And her defense is, well, that was his job. He was an illusionist. But he never reappeared. He wasn't a very good illusionist. I'm just like knee slapping. I'm knee slapping all the way home. I don't know. Maybe it's just my sense of humor. I don't know.
I was knee slapping and rolling on the floor, and crying all at the same time.
Well, it's just like one good joke after the next. It is. It's rich. And Mr. Green decides that he's not going to wait for Wadsworth to expose him, and so he says that he works for the State Department and he's a homosexual. And
everybody's face in the room.
The faces are amazing because Miss Scarlet just kind of looks down like, huh. And Wadsworth's eyes get real big and roll over like, oh my God.
Right.
And I have no shame. And but he's worried about losing his job. So he sits down next to Professor Plum, who immediately gets up because he's apparently a homophobe. And we learn that Mr. Body is actually the blackmailer, and there's a scuffle. You have this kind of like Three Stooges kind of slapstick. There's stomping on feet and fingers to the eyes and that sort of thing. And Wadsworth kind of breaks it up, says, hey, I have evidence of all the blackmail, and the police are coming. They'll be here in 45 minutes. Tell them what's going on. Mr. Body will be behind bars, and your troubles will be over. Mr. Body says, no, it's not going to be that easy. So he goes for his bag and gives each of the guests a wrapped box. And in those we have a candlestick, a rope, lead pipe, a wrench, revolver, and a knife. And he says, if one of you wants to kill Wadsworth, then no one will know about all this. He's got the key to the front door. All this can go away. So kill Wadsworth now. And he turns the light off. And you hear this, something fall, and a gunshot, and a scream. And the lights come back on. And Mr. Body is on the ground and believed to be dead. Professor Plum checks him out, checks his pulse. But there's no gunshot wound. There is a hole in the wall, so we don't know exactly what happened to him or if he's really dead. Professor Plum says he is. So who done it? And so they're trying to find out like what might have killed him. And in the corner, Mrs. Peacock is taking a drink of brandy, and Professor Plum points. Maybe she was poisoned. And she drops that
all the way
glass.
to the couch.
Yeah, she's got this great like raspy voice. I can't even do it. I end up sounding like Harvey Fierstein or something. But yeah, just a kind of scream, and she's so batty, and she's got that weird hat and those glasses, and she's just shaking. She's hysterical, so Mr. Green slaps her. Like
the room just goes quiet.
Yeah, I had to stop her from screaming. And so if it was poison, it's because since she dropped the glass and there's no more in there to see if it was poison. Like, well, how we might never know now. So, well, we'll know if Mrs. Peacock dies too. And so they all like hover around her and they're staring at her like just waiting for her to die. So there's a scream from somewhere in the house, and so someone says, it must be the murderer. So, well, why would he scream? And then they go in, and it's Yvette, and she's just fine. She said, I'm just scared, mon Dieu. I also drank the cognac, mon Dieu. And
she doesn't want to be alone in the dark.
No. And so she goes back with them, and Wadsworth says that this didn't really turn out like I planned. And like, what do you mean? So, well, this was my idea. I wrote the letters. I was being blackmailed too, and I figured if I could get everybody together, we could confront Mr. Body and and have him arrested. The mode or the reasoning behind Mr. Body's blackmail, he says, is that Mr. Body believed that they were all un-American. Like, didn't believe it was right for a senator to have a corrupt wife, or a doctor who took advantage of his patients, or a wife who emasculated her husband, and so on. And he decided to take this information and make a little money off of it. What could be more American than that? Mrs. Peacock gives this nice little silent nod of approval. So Wadsworth was a victim as well, and so was his wife, who at some point committed suicide. And the reason that Mr. Body was after them was that she had friends who were socialists.
You could just hear cries and gasping.
Oh, yeah. We all make mistakes. He's giving a handkerchief.
Miss White gets a handkerchief from her breast, and here you go. Yeah. Just wipe it all over your face.
It's a great cry. Tim Curry has a great cry here. And so as he's going through all this, he says that the Mr. Body threatened to report them to the House Un-American thing. Anyway, so the price of their silence was that they had to work for him for nothing and be slaves. And to make a long story short, everyone's like, too late, which is a running gag throughout the movie. And so, but they still don't know who killed Mr. Body. Was it one of them? Was it the cook? Was it Yvette? Was there someone else in the house? And the cook. So Let's run to the kitchen and check out the kitchen, see about the cook. Mr. Green is standing by the refrigerator.
Out of all people.
Freezer. Of all people, of course. And the cook falls out of the... Wow, I sound a lot better if I move over to this side of the microphone. I'm going to just shuffle a little bit.
There we go.
Yeah.
Hey.
Does it sound better?
Wow, you sound gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
Wow.
I was trying to find that sweet spot. The cook falls out of the freezer. Mr. Green catches her. You can see the knife in her back. And he's like, I didn't do it. Somebody help me. Somebody help me, please. And he's just falling down because the cook is quite a large woman.
And Scarlett's just looking at him like, all right, I'll just let you fall down first, then we can analyze.
Yeah, exactly. So let's check in for a moment. This is the whodunit tally. So we have 2 murders so far. One in the study with an unknown weapon because no bullet wound or other evidence was found. And one in the kitchen with a knife. Bullet count, 1. 5 bullets remain.
That is 5, ladies and gentlemen. 5.
Cinque. Cinco.
Cinco de Mayo.
So to decorate the, a little bit of trivia here, to decorate the interior sets, authentic 18th and 19th century furnishings were rented from private collectors, including the estate of Theodore Roosevelt. And after completion, the sets were bought by the producers of the show Dynasty, who used it as the fictional hotel, the Carlton. And I believe the only on-location shots were, I think, some of the exteriors of the house, and probably the part where the motorist and the policemen are milling about outside. But it was all done on a stage. So back to the movie. So they all start turning on each other. The colonel gets defensive. So at this point, they all start turning on each other. The colonel gets defensive. There's only one admitted killer here, he says, and it's her. Points at Mrs. White. How many husbands have you had? Mine or other women's? Yours. 5. 5. Yes, just the 5. Just get that, and again, just that really quick kind of, that
jabs.
Little jabby back and forth there.
Mm-hmm.
And Mrs. Peacock, she is the one who had the knife, and she was like, well, I had it, but I dropped it. Before I fainted, after I fainted, but I don't know. And she's just like flapping her arms like a bat. She's just getting hysterical again. And so they decided to take the cook into the study, of course, to keep the kitchen tidy. They discover that Mr. Body's body is gone.
Oh, wow. What happened?
Body? What body? Mr. Body's body is gone. And Mrs. Peacock asks Yvette if there's a ladies' room. Oui, madame. No, I just need to powder my nose. Thank you.
What?
No. No. Wadsworth has evidence in his possession. They are negatives of blackmail photos he intended to return to Colonel Mustard after Mr. Body was unmasked. Miss Scarlet snatches them away and sees that they are rather provocative photos of the Colonel and Yvette, and the Colonel really wants those back. So as Miss Scarlet is looking at these pictures, everybody else gets around and starts looking. It's like, wow, nobody can get in that position. And Professor Plum's like, yes, I can. Let me show you. And he grabs Mrs. White and just mounts her
in front of everybody.
Yeah, and they just do it so nonchalantly, and she doesn't even resist. She's just like, "Get off of me," just very flatly, like she does.
Like I'm used to it. I've had 5 husbands.
Right. So at this point, Mr. Body's dead body falls out of a closet onto Mrs. Peacock, and he's apparently really dead this time. Again,
because Professor Plum tried to be a doctor but couldn't.
Yeah, he failed that miserably.
Jeez.
And Mrs. Peacock's gonna faint, and like, somebody catch her. And Wadsworth says, "I'll catch her. Fall into my arms." She falls through his arms. Falls right through his arms. Oh my goodness.
Jeez.
Mr. Green again, shouts, I didn't do it. Like that. He's very insistent about his innocence. And Wadsworth gets all worked up, and he's shouting, and he's like, oh, stop shouting. He's like, I'm not shouting. All right, I am. And he's standing in the doorway, and on top of the doorway, the door frame, is the candlestick, and it falls on his head, knocks him out. At this point, what do we have? So whodunit tally. We still don't know who killed Mr. Body in the hall with the candlestick. We don't know who killed the cook in the kitchen with the knife. Bullet count is still 1. 5 bullets remain. Another little tidbit, little pop-up video action here. Carrie Fisher was originally contracted to play Miss Scarlet, but withdrew to enter treatment for drug and alcohol addiction. Jonathan Lynn's first choice for the role of Wadsworth was Leonard Rossiter, who I'm not familiar with, but he died before filming could get started. Second choice was Rowan Atkinson, of good old Mr. Bean, but it was decided he wasn't really known all that well at the time. And so Tim Curry was actually third in line for this role. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, and wow. I really couldn't imagine anyone else playing this role.
Right.
He brings so much
life,
energy, and he's so over the top. It's really
amazing.
great.
And imagine Carrie Fisher as Miss Scarlet, though.
Yeah,
How different that would have been.
It would have been a very different type of performance. I mean, she would have been great, I think, but yeah, Leslie Ann Warren, like she had done some other stuff. I know she had done a movie, Life Stinks, with Mel Brooks, but I'm not really familiar with a lot of the other things that she's done. She kind of reminds me of a young Susan Sarandon. Like she's got to get that.
I can see that
look about her. So back to the movie. They're back in the study. Wadsworth locks the remaining weapons in a cupboard and says, "Well, just throw the key away." And then as they all run to the door, and as he's about to throw it out, there's a motorist at the door. He said, "Hey, my car broke down. Can I use your phone?" And the group kind of gets into a huddle and confers. "Scott, you can use the phone in the there's one in the lounge, in the lounge." So take him in there, and Wadsworth locks him in. And then he finally throws the key away, we think, to the cupboard. Colonel Mustard peeks into the study. He's like, "Oh, just checking. 2 corpses. Everything's fine." So nothing's changed. And so they all pour brandy. And there's another kind of like the double negative joke. There's this where Colonel Mustard is asking Wadsworth, "Is there someone else in the house?" And he's like, "No." He's like, "You mean no there is or no there isn't?" It's like, "Yes." It's like, so there's
it's like, yes, you mean no, but yes. So as you're saying no, do you mean yes, there's not a person in this house, but yes, there's maybe a person? And then before he did that, as he's pouring the brandy, he's like, everybody else gets a brandy, and he starts spilling the brandy all over
it's just spilling all over the place. Like it's just going everywhere. It's not trying to even get it in the glass. It's like, okay, not even putting any effort in it. But then this kind of a little back and forth, like the double negative joke. I mean, it reminds me of like some early Abbott and Costello, kind of like the "Who's on first" kind of thing. And so I don't know, there's a lot of, even Three Stooges in there. So all of that, you can tell, influenced some of this physical comedy and some of the dialogue. And this actually reminds me of a movie called Noises Off. I think it was from 92, 91, 92, I think 92. It's based on a play. The movie itself is a play within a play. It stars Carol Burnett, Michael Caine, John Ritter, Christopher Reeve, Denholm Elliott. And those of you out there who haven't seen it, go find that one. It's a great farcical comedy as well. And it's got that same kind of witty banter that escalates very quickly. So go check that out. Colonel Mustard says, "Okay, at this point, what we need to do is just classical, military approach. We need to split up and search the house in pairs." And no one is really looking forward to this because, if one of us is the killer, then, what about the other person in the pair? What if they get killed? The colonel's like, "Well, right. Then we'll know who the killer is."
And of course, Mrs. Peacock is the one that, is in flames and hysterical about it all.
Yeah. And Colonel Mustard's like, "This is war, Peacock." He gets so excited. This is
going back to his roots.
Exactly. This is familiar territory for him. And so Wadsworth prepares these, they're kind of drawing straws, but they're drawing these like long matches. And so they all pick a match and they're trying to find their corresponding pair. And so we end up with Colonel Mustard, Miss Scarlet, Wadsworth, and Mrs. White, Mr. Green, and Yvette, and Professor Plum, and Mrs. Peacock. And again, this is such a dialogue-heavy movie, but this is that silent physical comedy where they're holding up each other's like matchsticks to see which ones match, and you can see the reactions.
Right.
like if like Miss Scarlett's like, "Oh shit, I'm with Colonel Mustard," and my favorite is the last one where Professor Plum, he's kind of floating around with his little stick, and he holds it up to Miss Peacock, and it matches, and he's like, "It's you or me, honey bunch."
I'm just like,
so flat about it too.
Yes.
And this is the part, sadly, where the movie starts to drag a little for me for a while. This is kind of the lull where they split up and search, and everyone is suspicious of their partner. It just feels a little weak to me because you have a lot going on in different parts of the house, and they're checking out popular rooms from the board game, like the billiards room, the conservatory. So we're not going to go through all of that right now.
It does take a while because they are scared of each other, but they did it in a way that they made sure they went through each pair of people and how they reacted and where they went. And so all that in accumulation really gets kind of, like you said, it drags.
Yeah, and I think the only highlight for me from that sequence is you've got Mr. Green and Yvette. They're like standing at the foot of a staircase for the attic, I guess.
Right, and it's a very narrow like stairwell.
Yeah, and they're trying to get the other person to go first. And then finally, Mr. Green's like, okay, I'll go first. And they just both stand there for many, many seconds.
Right. Did they go up at the same time?
Yeah, they go at the same time. After we've left them for a few minutes, and then we come back and they're still standing there at the bottom of the stairs. They haven't moved an inch. A police car drives by, and a cop notices the motorist's car. And he gets out and investigates. And the motorist, who is in the lounge on the phone, we see behind him that the fireplace swivels. There's a secret passage there, and he doesn't notice it. And a gloved hand, with a wrench, is stalking up on him. It's got this great like Italian horror film, like the Giallo film vibes, like
right.
You're just seeing like the black gloved hands with a weapon.
We finally realize that there's somebody there that.
Yes, we're actually seeing somebody executing the murder.
Right.
We see them actually doing something, and the motorist says on the phone that to whoever he's talking to, and one of the guests here is my old boss from Wham!
Right on the temple.
Right on the temple, and this same gloved hand puts together all of the evidence that was left in the study, including the tape recording of the conversation with Mr. Body, and it tosses them into the fireplace. Meanwhile, Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet find this secret passageway in the conservatory, I think, and it comes out into the lounge, and they find the motorist's body, and they freak out because I guess they think the killer is still in there, and so they're banging on the door, begging to be let out. And Wadsworth, he's like, I'll break it down. He backs up and he bursts into a sprint and he just bounces off the door and slides across the floor. It's a great moment because he looks so determined. He's just this little short guy and he's just.
And I love how he runs.
Yeah, he does run very funny. And he runs a lot in this movie, especially near the end. Yvette comes back with a gun. She trips. Over Wadsworth, I think the bullet strikes the cable holding the chandelier, and then fires two more shots into the door lock. One bullet grazes Colonel Mustard, and once they get him out, he's like, I can't take any more scares. I mean, and this gigantic chandelier just comes crashing down, and he looks like he's about to pass out. He just kind of, his mouth is agape, and he's like fumbling to sit down.
He's in shock.
He's in shock. This is the first crashing chandelier of two in the movie. So let's do a quick check-in with a whodunit tally. So we don't know yet who killed Mr. Body in the hall with a candlestick, or the cook in the kitchen with a knife, or the motorist in the lounge with a wrench. So we've got 3 bodies now. The bullet count, so there's 1 in the study that missed Mr. Body in the darkness, 1 at the chandelier, and 2 at the door lock. So we have...
That makes 1 + 2 + 1 + 1. No, maybe 1 + 1 + 2 + 1.
1 + 1 + 2 + 1.
Right, or 2 + 1 + 1 + 2.
Shut up. So by our calculations, there are 2 bullets left.
Yes, 2, ladies and gentlemen. 2.
Yes, 2. Numero 20. Eileen Brennan also played in a movie very similar to this one from 1975 called Murder by Death. It was, I think, written and directed by Neil Simon, who had done like The Odd Couple and that sort of thing. It starred Peter Falk, Columbo. We got Peter Sellers, James Coco, David Niven, Sir Alec Guinness as the butler. And the story is about like a number of like literary sleuths and their partners. They're invited to a mansion much like this one, and Truman Capote plays their host, Lionel Twain. And he makes that movie. I mean, they're all really great, and it has the same kind of humor. But my goodness, like just Truman Capote being himself, he's really pretty catty and funny. And Alec Guinness actually read the script for Star Wars while working on this movie, or working on Murder by Death. It's really great. It's a fun one too. And now Colleen Camp, who plays Yvette, had also done this movie called Daryl, or Daryl. It was like a boy who was also a robot. The same year, alongside Michael McKean, who was Mr. Green. And he was, I think, just coming off of production on Spinal Tap. And then a couple of years later, I think 87, she reunited with Christopher Lloyd in this movie called Walk Like a Man with Howie Mandel. And it looks ridiculous. I haven't seen it. But, of course, he probably started working on Clue just months after wrapping on Back to the Future. So there's a lot of like little connections there.
Right. Because he doesn't look anything like he's aged from Back to the Future. It was literally back to back.
Yeah, it was definitely back to back. So, so let's get back to Clue. so the mystery now is who unlocked the cupboard? How did they get the key if Wadsworth threw it away? The doorbell rings again. The cop shows up and asks about the motorist's car. He's like, oh, well, can I use your phone? And so Wadsworth sends him into the library. The cop recognizes Yvette. Everybody recognizes Yvette.
Yeah, she's just this hot babe that's rolling around the mansion that everybody knows.
Yeah, she's wearing this French maid outfit, and she's doing like the French accent, over the top French accent. But later on, we'll get to it. But her accent changes
just a little bit.
Just a little bit. The cop is locked into the library, and the phone rings before he can pick it up, before he can use it, and it's J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI. Like he's begging to be let out. He's banging on the door. I was like, I'm going to get you for false imprisonment and murder. And they open the door like, well, murder? Why do you say murder? He says, I just said that so you'd open the door. But you got a call from J. Edgar Hoover. And so the group asks Wadsworth, why is J. Edgar Hoover on your phone? He said, well, he's on everyone else's, so why shouldn't he be on mine? Which is, it's a good period joke because Hoover was tapping a lot of phones and stuff back in the day.
Right.
And so I guess Wadsworth decides to take the call. So he goes in the library, closes the door. Cop wants to know what's going on. He's like, I'm having a party. So I want to look around. So Mr. Green, you take him to this room and that room. And so Mr. Green showing him like the billiards room or something, or the ballroom. And he's like, I want to know what's going on in those two rooms. And of course, that's the study.
It's a study
and the lounge.
And the lounge.
Yeah,
it's a lounge. Mm-hmm.
And so, oh no, you don't want to go in there. It's far too shocking. And so, by the time the cop bursts in, they got some music playing. Shaboom, shaboom,
shaboom, shaboom.
Life could be a dream, sweetheart. All that sort of thing. And Mrs. White is making out with Mr. Body's corpse. And moving his arm like he's rubbing her hair. And Colonel Mustard is making out with the cook. Like,
while Mrs. Peacock is behind the cook, getting the arms.
Yeah, Mrs. Peacock is behind the cook, being like the arms, and she's like rubbing on the Colonel's back. And when you see her behind the curtain, her face is just horrifying. She's just kind of like going to a safe space so that she can just get through the next few minutes.
Right.
Meanwhile, Colonel Mustard is he's trying to, play the part like he's, he's having this passionate moment, but with one hand, he's trying to hold the cook's eyes open.
Oh, it's so funny.
And let's see. So then the cop wants to know what's going on in the lounge. So Professor Plum and Miss Scarlet are in the lounge and they're trying to get ready before the cop comes in there. And so they pour a little bit of brandy in the motorist's mouth, his dead body. They have him propped up in a chair and they put the bottle in his hand. Plum and Scarlet, they jump on the couch and he forces a smooch, that flirty perv.
What a guy.
And so when the cop bursts in, they sit up and the cop looks at the motorist and he's like, he's drunk, dead drunk. You're not going to be driving home, are you? Professor Plum, I love this. You won't be driving home, officer. I promise you that. So Wadsworth comes out from the library and when the cop comes up to me, he thinks the gig is up. Like he thinks that they've been found out. And he's like, I've seen everything. So, you have? So, oh, yeah, no, it's nothing illegal going on here. And it's a free country. Didn't you know that? Wadsworth is confused. He's like, I didn't know it was that free. and so finally the cop goes to use the phone. He's locked in again. Then the search in Paris recommences. Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet find another secret passage in the kitchen, which comes out through a painting in the study. And then now the power goes out, and Yvette sneaks off into this darkened room, and there's this voice that's it's a point of view shot. It's whispering, did anyone recognize you? And she says something like yes, but more than my face, they know every inch of my body.
Right, which is confusing.
It is confusing. Maybe she's referring to the photographs of her possibly nude with the Colonel.
Colonel Mustard.
Yeah. But we don't know. And then the rope is lassoed around her head and like a noose, and she's like, "Oh, it's you." But we don't know who that is, and so she's strangled. And so this is a scene I didn't really understand, and this is the moment where she doesn't speak in a French accent at all.
It's like she was undercover, or
yeah. No, I think you're right. Like I think that we do find out that like the cook and Yvette, everybody pretty much was either an accomplice or a victim.
It was all staged.
It was all staged, and so Yvette, being this French maid, was essentially like a role that she was playing. I know it depends on which ending you go with that makes sense to you, but it's a stretch for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I can definitely agree. Just out of all the murders that's happened, this was the one that was most confusing or just interesting in how it happened. So
yeah. Now the cop is killed with a lead pipe to the head. The doorbell rings. Door opens. It's this singing telegram girl.
This is my favorite scene.
Mine too.
Oh my goodness.
She looks so happy and cheerful. Just ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba. I am your singing telegram. Pow. Gun.
Like, where the fuck did this come from?
Just gun down there on the front steps, and like she barely, like a millisecond before she says her last word, you hear the gunshot and the muzzle flash. It's the timing of that just really sells that.
It does, because everyone's freaking out, and in the midst of all of the fear and terror in this godforsaken mansion, there's this one little piece of hope of this poor innocent girl at the doorstep.
I know.
Singing, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, she's someone good. I don't think she's done anything wrong. And she gets shot.
I know. Poor girl. But the gunshot creates panic. And of course, power is still out. And so everybody's scrambling. And Wadsworth, he doesn't know where he's at. He's trying to find the door. And he thinks he's got the doorknob, but he's standing in the shower, and he just turns it on, and he's just being blasted with water. And he's just standing there like, I'm a putz. He just stands there.
Great.
But then the power is restored, and everyone musters in the foyer, or the hall, rather, I guess. They first find Yvette dead in the billiards room on the pool table. They just look at her and walk away. They're like, oh, not surprised.
That's awesome.
Same for the cop, but they can't account for the gunshot. But someone said, "Oh, well, the front door had opened, so let's check it out." They find the singing telegram girl, and then they just close the door.
They give up. They've
no reaction. They've checked out.
It's crazy how intense this film gets, and how complex it gets, and how Tim Curry was able to fulfill his role in emphasizing all of that complexity.
Yeah, well, he definitely has, of all the characters, the most dialogue. And so they must have rehearsed this like a stage play, because it is so dependent on the dialogue and the physical comedy, like blocking all that out. I couldn't imagine any other way of approaching the rehearsal process.
Right.
Other than that.
And as we see in a little bit here, and how he exercises his narration of everything that's happened so far that we've talked about, I can't imagine the screenplay and his running and his here and there and acting everything out. It's just beautiful. It was beautifully done.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a lot of moving around. You've got all these different rooms in the house, and it's essentially supposed to be one structure. And so just working through the logistics of all that must have taken a lot of time. But once they've done a lot of work on the front end, like, it really paid off.
I agree.
So we've had a lot of murders in in the last few minutes. So let's do a little check-in with a whodunit tally. We don't know who killed these people. Mr. Body in the hall with a candlestick, the cook in the kitchen with a knife, the motorist in the lounge with a wrench, the cop in the library with a lead pipe, and a vet in the billiards room with a rope. Oh, and also the singing telegram girl on the front steps with a revolver. Bullet count so far, we've got 1 in the study that missed Mr. Body, 1 at the chandelier, 2 at the door lock, 1 at the singing telegram girl. We have 1 bullet left.
1. Remember that. 1
folks.
Bullet left.
No. Now, this singing telegram girl doesn't have a lot of screen time, of course. 4 or 5 seconds, maybe. Wasn't an actress at the time, but she was very successful in the music business as a guitarist for the Go-Go's. This is Jane Whedon, I guess is how you say it. And this is her first film role. She later go on to be in Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, and then to play Joan of Arc in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Wow. Well, that's a nice upgrade.
Yeah, I agree. Like when I was doing a little research for the show, and when I looked up her IMDb page and I saw still shots from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure with her as Joan of Arc, I was like, I knew that cherub-like face looked familiar. But,
yeah.
But of course, she didn't sing anything in Bill and Ted, and she actually said nothing, I think. Anywho, let's go back. Let's go back to the movie. So Wadsworth at this point knows who did it, and he goes through all of the events of the evening. We're not going to do that because we've basically done that already. And so I'm just going to share a few highlights from Wadsworth, his animated recap all over this mansion. When he's first describing like the minutia of the start of the evening, like I ran to the door and it was Mrs. White looking all pale and tragic. I introduced Mrs. White to Colonel Mustard. Hello. So he's like doing all the parts, everybody. And we learned that Mr. Body must have pretended to be dead because his plan had failed, and so this was kind of the only way he could save himself in the moment. We learned that Wadsworth knew about the secret passages and that the cook and Yvette were involved in the blackmail coerced by Mr. Body and became his accomplices. Mrs. White knew Yvette because Yvette had had an affair with Mrs. White's husband. Yvette had worked for Miss Scarlet, and Colonel Mustard was one of Miss Scarlet's clients, hence the implicating pictures of him and Yvette. And so they all had a motive. We learned that the cook worked for Mrs. Peacock. One of my favorite moments from this little bit is when they go to the kitchen, as like Wadsworth is describing, like this happened and this happened, and then we heard a scream and we ran to the kitchen. Mr. Green was standing by the freezer and they don't know where Wadsworth is. So where is he? And then the freezer opens and Wadsworth just falls out like the cook.
Just like the cook did.
Just like the cook. And he's really hamming it up. Like his eyes are rolled back. Like he's just, a limp noodle, and lands in Mr. Green's arms. And Mr. Green just looks down at him and just drops him. But Wadsworth he's still going, man. He's still
going. Yeah, he's even on the floor.
He's on his back on the floor, and he's at this point she was already dead. Blah 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 blah, and he's just running a mile a minute. And the whole time, as he's illustrating or reenacting things that are going on, like he's always beating up on Mr. Green. Like
it's so funny.
He's running up on him and pretending to whack him in the head with the candlestick,
and throwing him on the ground, throwing him in the bathrooms.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's throwing him all over the place, and he's just like, "Will you stop that?" I said, "No, no." Wadsworth says that he never threw out the key; that someone must have taken it from his pocket. And there's some speculation that there's a more complex link between them and their Washington jobs and all that sort of thing, and nuclear fusion bombs and communism and all that sort of thing. Wadsworth says that he invited the motorist, who was also blackmailed by Mr. Body, and because Colonel Mustard says that he was my driver during the war. He knew that I made my money as a war profiteer selling like radio parts on the black market and stuff. The singing telegram girl, we learned, was Professor Plum's patient, and she's the one that reported him, and that's what ultimately led to him losing his license to practice. And the evidence destroyed in the fire was actually information about Mr. Body's spies and informants. Right. And then the doorbell rings again. My goodness, we have so many people coming into this house at night. Oh my goodness, unannounced.
Partay.
It's just this guy in a trench coat and a hat with the bill turned up. And he's, the end of the world is at hand. And he's preaching repentance. And he says, your souls are in danger.
Do you love Jesus?
Yeah, Mrs. Peacock's like, our lives are in danger, you beatnik.
Slams the door in his face.
Yeah, just slams the door. And as part of the reenactment, Wadsworth switches off the power. And this becomes the reset point for the 3 subsequent possible endings. So here we have ending 1. Yvette killed the cook in the kitchen with a knife. She also killed Mr. Body in the hall with a candlestick. But why? To create confusion. It worked. Thanks, Mrs. Peacock. And she was acting under orders by somebody in their party. And so Wadsworth says that the pistol or the revolver is missing because the last person killed was the singing telegram girl. Gentlemen, turn out your pockets. Lady, turn out your purses. Whoever has the gun is the murderer. And it's revealed to be Miss Scarlet. So she killed the motorist in the lounge with a wrench, the cop in the library with a lead pipe, Yvette in the billiards room with the rope, and the singing telegram girl on the front steps with the revolver. Right. So Yvette and Miss Scarlet were both killing people in this ending. And Miss Scarlet says that her business is secrets, and she's going to sell their secrets or expose them. And this is when Wadsworth gets bold. He's like, the game's up, Scarlet. There are no more bullets left in that gun. It's like, oh yeah, there is. And so he's itemizing them like we did. So 1 in the study, 2 in the chandelier, 2 in the door, and 1 for the singing telegram. She says, no, it's 1 + 2 + 1 + 1. So even if you were right, that would be 1 + 1 + 2 + 1 +, not 1 + 2 + 1 + 1. It's like 1 + 1. Shut up!
Shut up! Shut up!
I love that. Awesome. It's another one of those little tight back to back or back and forth things. Suddenly, the cops burst in with a great fanfare. The chief, who was preaching about repentance and things, he's actually the police chief, and Wadsworth is found wrong when he takes the gun and says, "Oh, so I told you there were no more bullets left in this gun," and he fires a shot accidentally at the chandelier. Amazing coincidence that 2 shots accidentally fired can hit the cord that holds the chandelier. And of course it falls and right behind Colonel Mustard, who of course he can't take any more scares tonight. And this probably gave him a heart attack. And that's Clue. Or is it? Well, that's what could have happened. Here's an alternative. Ending 2. So when everyone turns out their pockets and purses, Mrs. Peacock has the gun. She's killed everybody.
Wow, what a bitch.
I know, right? Man. And of all of the, we're not going to go through all the different motives that she had for killing all these people, but I, as a viewer, didn't really care. I was just like, okay, well, she killed them. All right. So now what? Wadsworth says, well, let's just stack the bodies in the cellar, leave one at a time, and pretend that none of this ever happened. And Miss Peacock, she turns all salty, and I was just, I'll leave first, if you don't mind.
Like, okay, all right.
And they all, they're all in kind of a panic, like, oh, we owe you a vote of thanks, but she's a jolly good fellow. So they all break into song. Yeah.
The harmony was this is honestly, Brandon, this is the best ending for, in my opinion, this during all 3, this was the best one.
You like this one? I like it for, I do like it better than the Miss Scarlet one. And I like the song. I like the jolly good fellow bit.
Miss White's in the back, like doing this little
yeah
harmony ringer, and like a little soprano, just
yeah. I like that. And this is also the spot where Wadsworth reveals that he was working for the FBI, and that's why J. Edgar Hoover had called. And as Mrs. Peacock is leaving, the police chief approaches her and says, "The end is at hand," or something like that. And then the police burst out and apprehend her.
Right. Everyone
comes out on the front steps.
Wadsworth?
We're like the Mounties. We always get our man. Mr. Grace. Mrs. Peacock was a man?
Slap.
Colonel Mustard and Wadsworth just slap him.
We always get our man. God, that's the best.
So that's also how it could have happened. But here's what really happened. Ending 3. Professor Plum killed Mr. Body in the hall with a candlestick. Mrs. Peacock killed the cook in the kitchen with a knife. Colonel Mustard killed the motorist in the lounge with a wrench. Miss Scarlet killed the cop in the library with a lead pipe. Mrs. White killed a vet in the billiards room with the rope. And I love her little confession here. She's like, yes, I did it. I hated her so much. Flames on the side of my face. And she just keeps going. And everyone's just staring at her. And
Meanwhile, like he's going in the room checking on the vet. You know,
she's still going. And this was ad-lib. This was all improvised. So Madeline Kahn, this is one of the most memorable little moments from the movie. So we applaud her for that.
Oh, man.
And then finally, Wadsworth killed the singing telegram girl on the front steps with a revolver. We learned that Wadsworth is actually Mr. Body, and that the man we believe to be Mr. Body was actually his butler, and that everyone here was expendable, and there's no evidence against him now. He says that he never called the police, so let's just stack the bodies in the cellar, leave one at a time, and pretend that none of this ever happened. And Mr. Green takes his glasses off. He's like, so I guess you're just going to keep on blackmailing us all? Of course. Why not? I'll tell you why not. And he pulls out a pistol and bam! Nails Wadsworth. He's oh, good shot, Green. And he just slumps to the floor. And so Mr. Green's got his gun and he spins around. Everyone's kind of taken aback. It's like, are you a cop? Said, no, I'm a plant. I thought they called people like you a fruit. Oh, just gay jokes throughout this movie.
It's fantastic.
Very funny. FBI. Phone call from J. Edgar Hoover was for me. Told you I didn't do it. And then he lets the police in. Same fanfare. It's like, all right, well, who did it? It's like, oh, they all did it. Chief, take him away.
So and the police, they're all pointing guns at.
Yeah, they don't know what's going on. Yeah. And so that finally is Clue. So this whole the multiple ending concept is pretty cool. This was actually developed very early on by John Landis, who had said in an interview like he was going to bring on some other talented people to write the screenplay, such as playwright Tom Stoppard and Stephen Sondheim, and even Anthony Perkins of Psycho fame was going to be brought in to do some work on the screenplay. And if they had contributed anything, there's no evidence that I could find that suggests it, but the script was ultimately finished by Jonathan Lynn. And so we're used to watching this on home video, where we get all three endings, but when in its theatrical run, different theaters received one of the three endings. And so, so they put all those together for the home video release. And in some DVD releases, you can play it with, there's a little thing where you can do it where it's random. So you don't know what ending you're going to get. If it's going to be, It could be one of four endings. You get all of them, or you get the Miss Scarlet, Mrs. Peacock, or the Wadsworth ending. I like the idea of just having them all together.
That's nice. Yeah. And they do a good job with allowing you to keep up with the ending.
Yeah, they do make it a lot. They make it an approachable idea. Like, they're towards the end, especially after they've thrown so much information at you. And this movie actually didn't do very well at the box office. It had mixed reviews, and it only grossed like $14.6 million in the U.S. and the budget was like $15 million. So it lost money. But now it's got a cult following, and it's probably made oodles back in home video sales. There was actually a fourth ending filmed. It was also, I believe, with Wadsworth as the killer. I don't know if he killed everybody or just the singing telegram girl, but he, I think, escaped and tried to flee in a police car, and then there were Doberman pinchers in the back seat or something like that.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah. Okay. But ultimately, the director was like, "No, we got to get rid of this. This is not. This is too much." So I guess technically, you could say there are or were 5 possible endings for this movie. But final thoughts, value. What do you think?
Well, in terms of pop culture, I consider this movie and its humor in definitely my top 3 all-time comedy movies that I'd want to see over again. I distinctly remember seeing this movie as a little kid in middle school on the CD players, because my parents, they bought me this mobile CD player to use in the car, and on the car rides, if it's like a 2 to 3 hour car ride, I'd stick this baby in and play it and play it and play it to the point where, like I told you with that second ending with Miss Peacock, I just laugh my ass off every time. Like, we always get our man, you know. And
Peacock was a man.
Slap, you know, and they ended there. But it's this beautiful humor.
Yeah.
You know, that is what I call slapstick comedy. And
Absolutely, man.
You can't have it anywhere else. And I think they did a beautiful job.
Yeah, I mean it's timeless. So I mean, I think in terms of like the physical comedy, especially, but I mean also the dialogue. Like if it's done well, like it will succeed in every situation.
Right.
If it's done well, and you've got the talent to put it all together, not just in front of the camera but behind it. And I think this is one that, I mean, it has its problems and its quirks, but it in a very endearing sort of way. Like I think that it's, as a package deal, like it's a solid film. It's a lot of fun to watch. Like you've got that theatricality and the tight dialogue, that witty, sharp humor, an ensemble cast. I mean, it's a good time. And even though the plot or many plots, there's a lot of twists and turns. It's a convoluted mess, but you don't really need to follow it all that much to enjoy it. You know, we want that slapstick and those catty comebacks. I mean, they're fun, and it's even though it's so dialogue heavy, like the chances are that you'll catch something new with multiple viewings.
Right. And like we said, it's the little things about this movie that made it great.
Yes.
You know?
It's the tiny little details that are punctuated throughout.
Right. Beautiful family film.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And now, coming soon to video cassette.
So that's all we have for Clue today. So next time, we're going to be talking about horror comedy Freaked from 1993, starring Alex Winter and Randy Quaid. It is a wild and weird movie about an actor who visits a freak show with 2 of his compadres, and they get turned into hideous mutant freaks themselves by Elijah C. Scuggs, proud proprietor of his famous, fabulous Freakland and Mutant Emporium. If you want to watch it before our episode comes out, the full movie is on YouTube at the time of this recording, so check it out if you can. Remember to rate and review the show on iTunes, and if you have any questions or suggestions for us, or just want to tell us what you think of the show, send us an email at vericonvideo@gmail.com or call the Vericon Video hotline at 312-620-5560. Find us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, stalk us on Instagram at Vericon Video. Check out our Patreon page if you'd like to support the show and get monthly bonus episodes. The link is on our website. It's vericonvideo.com. We hope you enjoyed today's show, and we will see you again next time to chat about another exciting movie from the rental era. So long, everybody.
Peace out, guys.
I'm going to go home and sleep with my wife.
Goodbye, Vietnam! That's right. I'm history. I'm out of here. I got the lucky ticket home, baby.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Jenny.
Bye-bye, boys.
Have fun storming the castle. Goodbye.
Do take good care of yourself.
What is this, your farewell speech? Going home. Have a good trip.
Hasta la vista, baby.
I have to go.
Adieu, auf Wiedersehen, Gesundheit.
See